the show every day. Because a lot of the stuff I'm telling you, if you don't already know about this, it may not make sense to you. But that's the purpose of a social program, is to steal from the productive people. It is not to help the poor. It is to give the thieving politicians an opportunity to put their hands in the pockets of the productive people in society. Now, in order for them to do that, though, they had to do a few things. And one of the things that they had to do way back when, under Woodrow Wilson and some of the international bankers, is they had to set up the Federal Reserve. They had to take away the power from Congress to print money, to coin money, as is delegated, as is enunciated in the Constitution, and they had to put it in the hands of some private individuals. That was very necessary, and we're going to talk about that right now. Reading from Newswatch magazine, which is infinitely more legitimate than CNN or CBS or the New York Times. This will give you the history of the Federal Reserve. So everybody, I'll wait till everybody gets their pencil sharpened and their pen out, their paper, all that good stuff. Everybody ready? It's class. Let us begin. I'm reading now, okay? I may stop occasionally, but I'll read. Let us begin by exposing this mysterious entity known as the Federal Reserve banking system. This entity is not part of our government. The Fed is privately owned by a select group of powerful individuals and private banking cartels. Its express purpose is to fleece the American people by stealing our money under the pretext of a central banking system that calls itself federal. Yet, it is no more a part of or controlled by the federal government than is the Federal Express. And I'm going to stop right here for just a second to warn all of you that told me that I need to educate people. If I'm telling you something you already know, this is your fault. You told me to do this. So, for those of you who don't know about the Federal Reserve, you can learn. For those of you who do know about the Federal Reserve, quit telling me what to talk about. But anyway, here's the Federal Reserve, the rest of it. The United States Constitution, Article 1, Section 8 states, Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof. This authority is granted and vested only in the United States Congress. On April 19, 1982, the United States Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit Court, ruled the Federal Reserve banks are privately owned, locally controlled corporations. Lewis versus United States. So to make a long story short, the Federal Reserve that prints the dollars in your wallet right now is a privately owned corporation. And you have no say-so over it whatsoever. Nor does your representative in Congress, nor does your senator, nor does your president. And that is as ruled by the United States Court of Appeals. Chairman Louis T. McFadden of the House Banking and Currency Committee addressed the House on June 10, 1932. So here's his quote. Some people think the Federal Reserve banks are United States government institutions. They are not government institutions. They are private credit monopolies which prey upon the people of the United States for the benefit of themselves and their foreign and domestic swindlers and rich and predatory moneylenders. That's from the Congressional Record of 1932. You can look it up. In a speech delivered before the Washington Chamber of Commerce in 1921, William G. Harding, governor of the Federal Reserve Board, stated, from a legal standpoint, these banks are private corporations organized under a special act of Congress, namely the Federal Reserve Act. They are not, in the strict sense of the word, government banks. This special act by Congress in 1913 was in direct violation of the 16th Corpus Juris Secundum, Section 141, which states that Congress cannot delegate or sign over its authority to any individual, corporation, or foreign nation. Yet that is exactly what occurred in December of 1913 by a select group of individuals in the United States Congress. That special act has become the biggest fraud in the history of the United States. It is mathematically impossible to pay off the national debt when examining the origin of money under this central banking system. That is worth repeating. A lot of people talk about paying off the national debt. Let me repeat to you, and this is a fact. It is mathematically impossible to pay off the national debt when examining the origin of money, where money comes from under this central banking system. And this article goes on to explain exactly where that money comes from. It's very important that you know that the money we're dealing with is not based on value, it's actually based on debt. But I digress. Let me read along here. According to William H. Ferkler, man, that's a funny name, Ferkler. You like that? That's like that, what was that guy, Ferglers? Somebody, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm thinking about. All right, anyway, here we go. According to William H. Ferkler, Manager of Public Affairs, Department of the Treasury, Bureau of Engraving and Printing, Washington, D.C., here's his quote. As we have advised, the Federal Reserve is currently paying the Bureau approximately $23 for each 1,000 notes printed. This does not include the cost of printing, paper, ink, labor, etc. Therefore, 10,000 notes of any denomination, including the $100 note, would cost the Federal Reserve $230. In addition, the Federal Reserve must secure a pledge of collateral equal to the face value of the notes. Alright, now in ordering these illegal notes or promise to repay into existence by sending a purchase order to the Bureau of Engraving for 10,000 notes at a total cost of $230 to the Federal Reserve, this private banking cartel, does everybody follow me there? Literally what I'm saying is the private banking cartel known as the Federal Reserve pays $230 to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and in return for the $230 that the Federal Reserve pays, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing prints off 10,000 notes of any denomination for them. I'll be back in a minute. The number's 3439397. Anyway, we are talking about the Federal Reserve. We're talking about how the Federal Reserve and this private banking cartel changing the value of our money was necessary for them to impose all these social programs on us, to include Social Security, the Health Care Reform Act, Medicare, Medicaid, welfare, you name it. It was necessary that they change the very nature of the money in our pocket in order for these social programs to be able to be implemented. So, back in Newswatch magazine, December of 2008, talking about how the Federal Reserve literally for $230 can buy any amount of money that they want from the the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Now, thereby, let's see, attain a pledge of collateral equal to the face value of $50,000 if they are $5 bills, or $100,000 if they print $10 bills, or $200,000 if they order $20 bills, $500,000 if they have printed $50 bills, $1 million if they printed $100 bills, $5 million if they print $500 bills. You get it. This pledge that the Federal Reserve has to promise to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing is made to the Federal Reserve cartel actually by Congress. And the collateral to which Congress pledges, believe it or not, guess what the collateral is? That's right, it's the land, the labor, and the assets of the American people. That's the pledge. When the Federal Reserve goes to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and says, hey, we're going to give you, whatever, $230, you give us, $1 million worth of bills, the pledge is made by Congress to the Federal Reserve that says, well, if necessary, we can back that up with collateral, and the collateral is literally what they say here is the land, labor, and assets of the American people, but what it really is the taxes that this Congress is now going to impose upon you in the name of paying for these social programs. So what's happening is the Federal Reserve is printing off all this money, and then Congress has to make a promise to the Federal Reserve. When the Federal Reserve introduces that money into the system, the Congress has to make a promise to the Federal Reserve that they have the collateral to back up the value of that money, and they promise your money, the fruits of your labor, as the collateral. That's the collateral that Congress promises. So every time the Federal Reserve prints more money, this private banking cartel, every time they print money, Congress has to make a promise to the Federal Reserve that they can back that up with value, and the way that they do it is by taxing you in the name of funding social programs. That's what this is all about. It is basically the enslavement of the American people through debt. Because keep in mind, when they every time they print money, they have to back it up with collateral. So every dollar that's printed is basically a dollar based on debt. That's what we're talking about here. All right. Now, this private entity known as the Fed was incorporated in 1914 and has been creating a completely unnecessary national debt ever since. Simply stated, the Fed creates money as debt. The Fed creates money out of thin air. And this is true. This is accomplished at the stroke of a pen with nothing more than a book entry when the members of the Federal Reserve System make loans to the government, to banks, to businesses, and to individuals. This debt, money, is the money supply we are forced to use. So every time the money is introduced into the system, we are indebted as people. We are indebted as a nation. We are indebted in terms of our children and grandchildren. And ultimately, the value of our money is decreased as a part of this system. The Federal Reserve System's banks charge usury, or interest, everybody knows what usury is, on the created debt money. We American citizens are obligated to repay this debt money plus the interest. However, the money to pay the usury on the debt is never created within the system. The money to pay the usury, to pay the interest on this debt, is never created within the system. Loan repayments to banks reduce the money supply because the money is removed from circulation when the debt is repaid. To keep the money supply from shrinking, more borrowing is necessary. It is mathematically impossible to pay off the aggregate debt principal plus the aggregate usury. That is why, since the beginning of the Federal Reserve, we have never seen a decrease in the national debt. It is all part of the system. The more money that the government has to print, the more money that the government has to borrow from the Federal Reserve, the more interest that this private corporation collects. Now, if this doesn't make sense to anyone, let me make this real simple here. If you're a bank and you decide, let's say you're John Doe and you decide, hey, I want to be a banker, I want to open up my own bank. How are you going to make money as a banker? What are you going to do? I'll tell you how you're going to make money. You're going to loan out money so that you can collect interest on it. That's exactly what you're going to do. Now, the thing is, obviously, not to make it too complicated, but if you're John Doe is a regular banker, you have to abide by certain regulations in theory. You know, and you have to have a certain amount of money in your bank to be able to loan out a certain amount of money. But that's how you're going to make your money, is off of interest. Well, a private corporation that owns our Congress's ability to print and coin money, well, they're making interest off of us as a part of their business model. I'll be back.